The plan is to use this power supply, which came from an old Lenovo desktop. So it's got 12 amps on the 12 volt rail and 16 amps on the other 12 volt rail. Now that adds up to 336, yet it says the max output is 230 watts. So clearly you can't max each rail out. I think 1401 is week 1 of 2014. And actually 2014-0102, so the 2nd of January 2014. There you go. So this is an 11, almost 12-year-old power supply. It is 80 plus bronze rated though. I've already taken the liberty of cutting all the connectors off. So the 2 brown wires are 12 volt, the 3 yellow wires are 12 volt, and then we've got, is that 4 black wires? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect, so we've got 5 black wires, so in other words we have plenty. We will need the green, and we can use this black wire here, and that'll start the motherboard. The purple we aren't going to need because that's standby, and this grey I think is just to check that the output voltage is okay. So I think we'll do without it, and if it's unstable we'll worry about it later pretty much. The power supplies are going to work something along these lines. I've already worked out I'm going to need to file away some of this. It's not as much as you think, that's just because I've set them down for recording, but I need to file maybe 2 or 3 millimeters back here, and then fingers crossed that mount point will still be strong enough. Luckily they've stamped out the steel, so you know, I do think it'll be okay, and if not, there's always ways and means to brace it. Oh, and don't forget the fans. There's plenty of room for the fans. Look what I found in my box of wire. Clearly this is from some old project that I did. I can actually remember the power supply I took this from because it's the only one I've ever seen with green 12 volt cable. But this is just perfect. This run of cable is pretty much the correct length, so I can just snip it off about here, solder it into my existing supply, and we're going to be away. I've done a bit of work to both the power supplies off camera, so I've spliced in a male fan connector here and a female fan connector there. Now they aren't actually for fans. What I've done is you'll notice there's a bit of green wire here at the top, and there's a green wire there as well, because that is the green wire is the motherboard power on signal. So I've spliced this into the middle so I can connect this to here, and then that way when I press the power button on the PC, the power signal is also going to go to this power supply through this cable, so the two of them will switch on at exactly the same time, and that obviously means that I can use the PC without that dodgy using tweezers here, and because that would just be completely impractical. Hopefully that little demo there makes it a bit clearer. You see how the one supply is plugged into the other? That's all I need. As for the power supply itself, I'm going to start with the grounds first because that's going to be a bit easier, because basically there's 5 of them and there's 5 wires on the power supply. Whereas for the 12 volts there's 3 wires here, but there's 5 on the PSU and we need to use all 5. So I'm going to move the power supply out of the way. I'm going to sort of strip back, we'll do it in blocks of 2, so we'll do 2, 2 and 1. So I'll strip back 2 of these wires, then I'll strip back another 2, or maybe I can do it in a block of 3. I think 3 is a limit, but let's do it like that. So I can't actually strip too much wire off because I cut these a little bit shorter than I should have. Right, and then on the PSU side, I've got just enough room to fit this tool in, luckily. Otherwise this would be a lot harder. There we go. So we're going to fold this up the way, and we're going to fold this just across. And it's going to be quite tough to get this block of wire to stay where it is. But if it goes wrong, I'll just cut it out and we'll just go again. It's really not a big deal. So that's going to go like that, and I'm just going to cross my fingers, literally, that it works. I'm then going to add a bunch of flux. Flux stops corrosion, flux helps solder fly. Flux is really useful. I'm going to put plenty of solder on the iron itself, because bear in mind this is a lot to ask of an iron the size that mine is. We're going to start just absolutely dumping solder into the top. Loads of it. We're going to dump it on, dump it on, dump it on, dump it on, dump it on. That is a huge amount of solder. I'm going to come away. I don't know why I closed the flux, but I'm going to add more to the top, plenty of it. Really not being stingy here. Right, now the flux is on there. More on the iron. And we're going to come in from beneath and just start. We've got to get this big blob of solder to melt. Now, by the way, you are going to melt the wire doing this. If you're trying to stick this thickness of wire together, then it's pretty much inevitable that it's going to melt. But it doesn't matter if you melt it a bit, as long as you've got good quality heat shrink. I care more about getting this solder to actually flow through every wire and making sure the joint's thoroughly wetted than a little bit of melted plastic. So that's what I'm going to do, just keep flowing it on. And that is just a huge amount of solder. And yep, when it drips out the bottom, you know it's done. So that is a quality joint right there. And I'm going to leave that literally for a minute or two to cool down, because the solder is really, the solder's boiling hot, but I want to make sure it thoroughly dries into place. If you put the solder on, come away, and then you start yanking around at the wire, you'll crack the solder on the inside, and that's going to reduce the quality of the connection. That's the first one soldered up, so let's solder up the next one. There's a trick for you, by the way. You put a big piece of heat shrink tubing on, and you also put a little piece on, because that way, if the joint is a bit bigger than expected, you can just roll this big piece over, no problem. If it's a bit smaller than expected, then fine, you just cut the big piece away. But you really don't want to be in the situation where you're stuck and unable to solder the thing up, or should I say you're unable to cover it over. So, same as last time, I'm going to fold this up. And it's a lot easier with just 2 wires. Just turn the iron back on, I'm going to fold this across, put them on top of each other, and then fold one into the other. Sort of get your nails in there, make sure they're really sort of snugly in place. Same as last time, you won't need flux if you're doing just 2 wires, but I'm going to put it on anyway because it doesn't hurt. And then same as last time, let's start melting the flux. And we're just going to dump loads of solder into the top. And you can just use the iron to get it out of here if it doesn't want to. Right, there we are. So melt all the flux in, and then we're gonna have to come around, unfortunately, because this other wire's in the way. But melt the flux in, then melt the solder. Don't be stingy here, don't worry about wasting a couple pence worth of solder and a couple pence worth of flux. You would rather do that than have a joint that isn't quality, that ends up getting hot, or even worse, catches fire. Right, that is thoroughly soldered. And unfortunately we are going to melt some of this green insulation here, because these don't always fall exactly into the position you want them to, so just bad luck pretty much. In fact, this is going to be the toughest one to solder. I'm going to have to do it at a funny angle. So we're going to be flowing solder in through the side this time. But it is easier to just start at the top and start flooding it in, and then move to the bottom and start trying to, yeah, that's no good, start trying to pull it the rest of the way around. So if we do that, that's going to start melting, which is nice, and I'm just going to start flooding it in. It's way more than you need. Like, see what I mean? This solder is just amazing. Yeah, pull away, and that's it, that's done. I might have a bit of trouble with this one in particular because it's the only one that I've got just a thin piece of heat shrink tubing on. You can see it's quite difficult to slide it over because this has kind of gone into a V shape. So I'm going to get the wire and just sort of bend it, and obviously you can't put a silly amount of force through it, you don't want to damage it, but that I should just about get away with that, experience teaches me, although I may very well not. But of course once this is in place in the computer, it's in place. But there's a trick you can do with tweezers. You can use tweezers though and sort of pull on them and make the heat shrink a bit sort of wider. This is really cheap rubbish heat shrink, you won't be surprised to hear. You don't want to do too much though in case you tear it, because if you tear it, of course, it's game over. I kind of thought this would happen as I was doing this wire, why didn't I listen to myself? Thing is though, just stay patient as much as you can. Just finesse it, and there we go, boom, told you. Just have to keep calm there. That's done, hallelujah. And this is the point where you realise, oh no, I forgot to put heat shrink on one of them, aren't I a complete? So, we've got these 4 connections that have been made. And that's it, let's get it heated up, and let's get this heat shrink tubing locked down. As the name implies, heat shrink tubing shrinks when you heat it, and it's tubing. So we're just going to add the heat. I really like this green stuff though, it's like 3:1, it shrinks down massively. Whereas this black tubing is rubbish. Now the green stuff came as part of a kit, the black stuff I bought separately. It was sold to me as 3:1, but clearly it isn't, it's 2:1. I mean, it does the job, but you know, I don't like being lied to. We're going to spin that around, we're going to keep adding heat. The hot air set to 250 degrees, I've set the airflow to max. I'm going to bend that out of the way, keep adding heat. And believe it or not, in the real world this has only taken 25 minutes. This is it, job done. As you can see that, looking good. I'll throw a zip tie or two around it, but this power supply is now officially ready to go in the PC. I obviously don't have the 3D printed bracketry for it yet because I've not even started designing it because, surprise surprise, I need a working computer to do that. But I can put this thing in the machine and we can use it temporarily, so I can design a bracket to mount it permanently. This is the moment of truth. This isn't the final resting place of these two power supplies because the one on the bottom obviously needs to be lifted up, otherwise it'll overheat within minutes. This cable, if I've done my maths right, will reach just about, and it will plug in, and then, yep, even better, we'll be able to sort of fold that down a little, and it will run between the two fans, and then we'll have a fan here and a fan here, and when this power supply is 3D printed and it's in place and stuff, it's going to be lifted up just ever so slightly, and there's going to be no strain on that cable. There we go, then that's going to be the temporary setup. The PC is literally going to sit on the floor like that. I've got the wire strippers in here so that some air can get to the fan, and honestly it's looking promising. So I'm going to go and plug it in and then I'll get back to you when it's actually running. Took a moment, but it's in position, it's plugged into the wall. Question is, will it actually turn on? So here we go, and nothing happened. Not great. Why is that then? Why has nothing happened? Oh, there we go. For a moment there I was thinking I'd done something wrong. Right, chair squeaking. Not liking that noise. God, my setup is such a bunch of junk, isn't it? Let's just try turning it off and turning it back on. So that's off, we'll try again. I'm not too sure why that is, I've got to be honest. Believe it or not, the power supply's made those funny noises since day one, so that's not anything to do with what I've just done. I've realised that the reason why it's not working is because this bottom power supply isn't turning on. I've taken it apart, and grey is indeed for 5V ground. Grey is for power good, and the green is indeed, power on. But the purple, or should I say the black wire that was right next to the purple, it says 5V standby ground, and I really don't see why it would be the case, but there's a very slim chance that I can't use that ground and that I have to use any other ground. I've taken the power supply apart, I've checked its internal fuse, and everything is absolutely fine. So the only thing it can be, at least my theory, is that the power supply thinks that the 12V rails are shorted, because if we look at the side here, I'll flip it around for you. We've got 12V V1 yellow, 12V V2 brown. I've not seen it where it's made a difference before, but it might very well think, either the CPU's drawing too much power, or maybe the motherboard's drawing too much power, because the motherboard is the yellow and the CPU's the brown. So, as you can see here, we've got two browns and one yellow going into the same connector. So I'm going to take my wire cutters and I'm going to snip that singular yellow. But that's really that's the only thing I think it can be at this point. It really pains me to say this, but it's still not working. I've snipped the yellow and I've reduced the length just a tiny bit. And despite that, I've bridged the, I've done whatever I need to do to make this switch on, but it's still not switching on, it's still not working. Have a look at that one. It's running. Have a look at this one. It's quite hard to see, but that one's running as well. Notice the difference? It turns out that in my tiredness, or whatever it was, I've managed to put these the wrong way around. So all I need to do, so if I let go of that now, you'll see that one carries on running, and this one has stopped running. So all I need to do, luckily, and I'm really, really glad I used a fan connector now, is just swap those two wires around. That's it. If you're wondering how to rewire one of these fan connectors, you get a screwdriver with a flathead. There's a little metal bit that sticks out, you push down on it, you pull on the wire. Sometimes it takes quite a bit of force to push down. You shouldn't be pulling too hard on the wire to free it up. There we go. We'll do the other side. There we go. Right, so I'm now going to get my tweezers or a tool underneath. There's a tiny little barb that sticks out. Can you see that there, this little barb? That barb needs to be lifted up, and when you lift it up you click it back into the connector. I've flipped it around and there we go. I can now plug this into the other supply and, fingers crossed, literally, the two of them will now work in unison. Here we go. I've got them all plugged in, the two of them are both connected together. If I now short the green and the black, so by doing this, they should both switch on. So, this one's running, and then the one on the bottom is also running. And do you know what's more important? The one that's running is the lighty on, as in the bigger one, the older one, the one that I've just made the modifications to, look. So that's now running. So I reckon if I put this thing in the computer and throw my tweezers across the room, that it'll work. This has taken a lot of effort so far, and we're only really a third of the way there. But when I press this button now, the two power supplies should come to life and I should get an output on the screen. No, I shouldn't, because I need to do this. Right, I'll do that. That will help. I'm going to click the power button. It's come to life. I'm going to stand up, stand back. Please let there be a picture. I'm going to be so deflated if not. Right, power supply is making funny noises just like it usually does. Still no output to my monitors, unless maybe it needs to rewrite the BIOS or something. Don't see why it would. Oh, I really will have to call it a night if this doesn't work. It's got a monitor poker button. So that is set to DVI because it's via an HDMI adapter. Philips, I'll just leave the Philips off for the moment. Well, the Philips are switched on, but I'm not worried about the Philips if you know what I mean. Oh my god, are you being serious? Oh no, I have plugged them in together. Okay, I thought I hadn't for a moment there. Ugh, god damn it. Right, let's switch this thing off. It's good news actually, it took the 4 full seconds to shut down. If it had turned off instantly, I would have been worried. But we've got no red light here. Turn this on. We do now get the red light, although to be fair, the red light was there when it wasn't working, so. You know how it is though, right? When you're repairing stuff and the lights on your monitors keep blinking and you think, oh, and it's like, I finally worked it out. I didn't do anything wrong when I hooked this up. I didn't do anything wrong when I hooked that up. So I shouldn't have second-guessed myself. But for some reason, even though this power supply turns on when I short this cable as it should, this power supply doesn't turn on when I short these two pins, even though the theory is one's connected to ground, one's connected to green, which is exactly what I'm doing here, because black is ground and green is, well, green is power on. So for some reason, the ground I've connected to can't be used to power the machine up or something. I really don't know at this point. That might explain it. There was a problem somewhere in the solder between this end of the green wire and that end of the green wire. I cut out what I've added, but now if I grab this this sad little bit of wire here and I touch it to there, you'll see the power supply starts up. So there you go, power supply is running. I bring it away, power supply turns off. What an absolute ordeal. I'll spare you the expletives. I've just spent a bunch of time doing what I just did, but doing it again and crossing my fingers that this time it actually works the way I want it to. So grey is for green, and over here, red is for green. Here we go. There it is. Right, still switches on. Still got the red light on the GPU. Still got nothing. Got annoying noises being made. Got really annoying noises being made actually. That power supply flipping sucks. And it's the original one to the computer, by the way. You know the PC's working fine because the numlock LED lights up. Yeah, don't know what's going on here. Really don't. The supply here is switched on, and we're a lot further ahead than last time because that one's switched on as well, and I'm just shorting the one. Don't get excited when you see the screen and you think it's working. I've just plugged into the internal monitor, and if I go to the BIOS, the active video is set to integrated graphics. Isn't that funny? Let's set it to PEG, which I'm going to assume means, yeah, there you are, PCIe graphics device. Gonna hit F10, we're gonna reset, and then if it is actually gonna start displaying externally, it'll display on my Dell monitor, and if it doesn't, I'll have to reset the BIOS. So I'm gonna spam the F1 key because I want to enter the BIOS. No, still displays on the internal monitor and nothing on the Dell. Maybe I need to unplug the internal monitor. So video setup's now set to PEG. So I'm going to turn the machine off. Going to unplug my monitor. At least I know I can use this thing in the meantime. Going to switch it on. Going to spam the F1 key once again to take me into BIOS. And watch as the Dell monitor does nothing. So I know we're in the BIOS now because the unlock key lights up. And we got nothing on that bad boy, no signal coming from the computer, because evidently the GPU is not working the way it's supposed to. I even took the liberty of flipping these over, and I can see that that fan is quite clearly spinning. Not that you can see it yourselves. And this apparently claims there's no... I mean, maybe it thinks there is power going to it. I distinctly remember it worked while we tested it on the bench, but we didn't test it with that power supply. So maybe that grey wire I was talking about earlier needs to be connected, or maybe there's just some other issue. I really don't know. Just before I went to bed, something just clicked. You see that pair of tweezers right there? That is bridging a ground pin that is inexplicably cut off to the next ground pin across. Because it turns out that all 5 of the grounds need to be connected. That's what all that headache was, all the head scratching and so on. That's literally all it was. The thing now outputs a picture, and it's only plugged in via the GPU, so that is a win. I've jumped ahead a bit here, so you can see a new white wire that's been added into the mix. So this white wire is the 12 volt basically sense, because if you run a power supply without it, it's got no idea what the voltage is at the end of the cable, because it's all well and good having 12 volts here, but you get voltage drop. So you run the sense wire to the end, and that tells the power supply, hey, down here I'm 11.7, here I'm 12, and the power supply says fine. It increases the voltage slightly to make the output the 12 volts that it needs to be. You can see this is just an absolute mess of different colours and so on. I ended up snipping off of the 8-pin connector and just soldering a new one that isn't damaged. I rejoined this wire here that was damaged and so on, so this power supply is now finally ready to go. It's been quite a lot of effort to get it to this point, but I've learned a lot, and that's the reason for doing personal projects, so that you can learn, so that next time you do it twice as fast or even 3 times as fast. Because if I were to do this again, I could smash it out in half an hour. But anyway, I'm going to get this thing put in the PC, we'll put them together, and it should just work. After all of this work, by the way, it transpires that the Intel Arc series of graphics cards need something called resizable bar. My motherboard doesn't support resizable bar because it's a 9th generation chip, and you need a 10th generation chip or newer. Isn't that funny? Yes, it starts with the word planned and it rhymes with obsolescence. So what I'm going to need to do is sell this graphics card and replace it with an RTX 3060 from Nvidia. Now, luckily they're both worth the same, and I lucked out with this card. It's basically brand new, it's got its box, it's got its accessories, so I'll actually be able to sell it for a little bit more than I paid, but I would much rather just have a working product. But either way, I thought I'd just show you, because it's important to know that these projects don't go the way you want them to. You end up going back and forth for ages, but the end result is usually worth it. When I was doing the editing, I realised I didn't actually show you the computer working with both the power supplies. So we've got supply number 1 on the top, supply number 2 at the bottom. I've got my graphics card, and I'm not going to go into too much detail about that because we'll be covering it later. But I've used this computer to edit the video. I've edited a different video. I've done a bunch of web browsing. I've gotten absolutely loads of things done with this PC. So really, I can't complain at all. It took a lot of effort, but this dual power supply solution is honestly working really, really well. I'm very, very happy with it. So there we have it then. Through trials of tribulations and blood, sweat and tears, I've managed to get there. The thing is now working. The computer, that is now working. Really pleased with it. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm not going to give you any spoilers for the future, at least not any more spoilers than I've already given you throughout the course of the video anyway. But I've been using the computer for a little while. I'm going to attempt to play some games in it this evening, although that's going to be mentioned much further down the line, future video. I did decide to make this one fairly detailed, fairly in-depth. My thought process was I didn't just want to show you the start and then say, oh, I had a bunch of issues, but I managed to fix them, you know, cut out all of that middle stuff, and then just give you the end, because you're only going to have a 5-minute video, and all of the sort of the bits in the middle, you know, that actually make you a better technician, or that may actually make this thing interesting to watch, they're going to be cut out. I don't like doing that. I do like to go into detail. I don't want to bore people to tears, because, well, what fun would that be? But I did want to show you the mistakes so that you can learn from them, so that if you're silly enough to put 2 power supplies in your computer like I have, then you haven't got to, you know, the theory is you're going to get a bit further than I did, and you're going to get there a lot more quickly. Anyway, though, with all of that said, if you did find the thing useful, maybe if you even found it, maybe if there's even a technique or two you can take away, then feel free to leave me a like. Very, very handy. I won't sit here and beg you to do that. It's just a suggestion. On the topic of suggestions, feel free to subscribe. The reason why you may subscribe is because you can then see future videos in this series, as well as all the other ones that I do. Most of the time it is repair, sometimes it is sort of woodworking, you know. Woodworking, you know. I just said that twice. I guess my record must be broken. Other times it's other things that aren't related to electronics but are still loosely related to repair. So, you know, it's not just I fix this and I fix this and I fix this and I fix this and I fix this. No, not always the same stuff. Remember, subscribing is free. You can always change your mind if you don't want to carry on watching this rubbish later, you know, these D-tier videos. With that in mind, though, I'm going to get out of here because I'm not feeling terribly well, and I get the distinct impression I'm rambling. You know, if someone was stood over there, they'd be nodding at me to get on with it. So I'm going to get on with it. I'm going to lean forwards. I'm going to hit the stop button. I'm going to do that right now.